Hello, Internet people. Welcome to the first episode of Yang 101, a podcast where we'll be discussing the policies of presidential candidate and Internet, or at least Reddit darling, Andrew Yang. I'm Derek. I'm a professor at a medium-ish private university on the East Coast, and I teach college writing or freshman composition as it. And Carl, if you'd like to introduce yourself.
Yes, so I'm Carl. I'm a college student at a small university in the Bay Area in California, and I am studying engineering and writing, so kind of double major.
Brief introduction for what we're going to be doing with this podcast. This is just going to be a few people having conversations about Andrew Yang's policies. It's not Andrew Yang cheerleading or propaganda or, let's all just talk about how great he is. I suspect along the way we're going to have disagreements either with each other or actually with some of Yang's policies. And also just discussions about things where we don't really know how the policy would play out if we have sort of concerns or reservations. So
Yep.
That sounds like what we said we were going to do.
Yeah, no, for sure. And just having conversations around, what are some of the impacts, what are some of the challenges or concerns that might exist, and some of the possibilities for, both good or bad for any of the various policies that he's got.
Yeah, and there's so many different policies where it would actually be pretty extraordinary if you ended up agreeing with every single thing that he's taken a position on.
Yeah, there's probably one person who agrees with everything, and his name's Andrew Yang.
Yeah, I was going to say, when I was thinking about this, politicians who, the number of people who I agree with on every single issue, it might be zero, because I'm going to have problems with positions that I take. Where I'm like, I've got some positions that I don't really feel strongly about and could probably argue myself out of them if I had to.
Absolutely.
This number between 0 and 1 people is the number of people I agree with.
I think that's probably true for everybody. So
yeah. All right. So our topic for this first issue, we're going to be discussing universal basic income, but in the context of how we would see this playing out for college students. So any specific challenges or advantages that it would have for them. So we're not going to be discussing just is universal basic income a good idea, for everyone. I think that's a much bigger topic. We might have to break into several different episodes. But this is just, accepting for the sake of argument that universal basic income's a good idea. And I think if you're supporting Yang, you probably are already, taking that position. But how do we see this affecting college? And as the current college student, I think I'll let you take the lead on this.
Yeah, of course. So, obviously as a college student, there are several things that I run into on a fairly regular basis, either myself or my friends at school. And $1,000 a month would go a long way towards fixing some of that. Last semester, I was in a class that had 6 students in it, and 3 of the students didn't finish the semester because they couldn't afford to pay tuition and had to drop out. And that's the sort of thing where they've already accrued some student debt. They've already, put in some time and effort, and because they couldn't come up with, I think the payment was $350, they were not able to finish that semester, which means either they drop out of the college entirely or they find some way to pay for that again and come back, but they have to take a class a second time. They're adding even more student debt on top of what they've already accumulated. And it was $350. It was a small amount of money, but it was enough that it majorly impacted their lives and really upset their plans. And so there are issues like that the $1,000 a month could absolutely prevent. And then of course, as a college student, we all know that there are math books out there that cost, $20, and there are math books that cost $250, and your class is going to assign you the one that costs $250. That's just life as a college student. Your books, your supplies, they're incredibly expensive. And most college students are working a part-time job and relying on student loans, relying on parental support, or relying on grants and things like that. And there's a lot of expenses that go into being a college student that, quite frankly, almost everybody that I know skips out on something. So there are students who don't buy the book. There are students who skip meals. There are students living out of their cars so they don't have to pay rent. But virtually everybody that I know is skipping something that $1,000 a month would absolutely help them to cover. So it's one of those things where just purely from a quality of life standpoint, it would absolutely go a long way for most college students. And then there's the other aspect of, what are the long-term effects of that? So if I'm living out of my car for 4 years while I go to school, that's particularly hard, and there are potential consequences to that. If you get harassed by the police for sleeping in a car, because there are many states and many countries and cities that are making it illegal to sleep in a car. They're passing ordinances that if they catch you doing that, you can get fined or even get jail time. And so these are repercussions that can follow you. So if you end up getting arrested in a municipality that makes it a crime punishable by jail time, then that's on your record, and that's something that will follow you. And most of the time they're misdemeanors, so it's not that big of a deal. You don't have to check the I'm a felon box on a job application, but it's still something that can majorly impact you down the line. And so having to live with that, even if you never get arrested, just having to live with the fact that I'm sleeping in my car, I'm breaking the law right now just in order to go to school, that can have a major impact on your mental health, on your your outlook on life, how you feel about yourself, your self-esteem, your well-being. So there are some major impacts that oftentimes get ignored when people have these conversations.
And so, just to make it really clear, sort of within the framework of the discussion of how is this specifically impacting college students, I think there's sort of a question of, well, how is that different for college students versus, say, anyone else who's living in their car right now? And where my instinct on this is that what makes college expenses really tricky is it's not just, the tuition and the cost of books and, your fees and everything, but college also comes with this other hidden expense, which is opportunity cost. If you're a full-time student, it's really hard to hold down a full-time job and expect to do well with your schoolwork. There's some people who are just amazingly disciplined and are able to pull it off. But I would say, for the average person, if you're taking 15 credit hours a semester and working 40 hours a week, you are probably going to see your grades suffer significantly. It's going to be very hard to, not get on academic probation or anything like that. And you're just not going to be getting the full benefit of your education if you don't have time to, reread assignments or actually, put more time into essays, join academic clubs and things like that. And so the universal basic income really helps to make up for that opportunity cost, because so this is where a bit more of my background doing research and publishing has been in, is sort of like radical cost reform for college. And one issue that always keeps coming up is even if you can make college free, the college students, tuition free, you still have room and board to figure. And if you're a full-time college student and you can't cover room and board, then you can't go be a full-time college student. So that's where I see universal basic income coming in, is it fills that last step between, what if we're making college actually free beyond just wiping out to it.
Yeah. That's a really good point is that, if you're not able to focus on your studies, your grades are going to suffer. You're going to miss out on certain things. You can't participate in, the student body, student government. You can't participate in clubs because you're out working. So that's a really good point.
Yeah, I have students that say,
cost.
They can't come by office hours because they have to go immediately from my class to their job. And I try to, schedule, get on Skype or whatever and talk when it's convenient for them. But, they just have less time in general. And so, if you're a college student who has to work, even just 20 hours a week, the universal basic income is probably going to be about equivalent to what you're getting from your part-time job anyways. And now you can either just live more comfortably, or you can scale back the number of hours.
Yeah, absolutely. And there's other elements as well. And it goes to the social aspect of college. An important part is, making friends and spending time with people and building those connections with people who are going to be in the same field as you, who can help you potentially get a job down the line. And if you're working 2 part-time jobs to pay the bills, you're not making those connections. You're not making those friends. And so you're going to have it hard even once you've graduated out in the workforce because you don't know anybody. So there's nobody who can be like, hey, boss, this guy's good. You should check out his resume. You won't have any of that connection.
This is something that I think actually gets lost in a lot of conversations about education. I'll try to be pretty brief on this because it's a bit of a side issue. But academia is an inherently social endeavor. And, if you're just taking the point of view of I'll just read whatever's in the textbook, study the professor's PowerPoint slides and take the test and not talk to anyone else on campus about what I'm studying, you're missing out on a lot of it. Really what most of academia is aiming at is those conversations, whether inside the classroom or out. This is why you have so many academic clubs on college campuses. And I know I learned a ton just by joining my campus philosophy club. And we would be able to cover issues that weren't in the philosophy classes because they're just like weird niche things that didn't really fit a curriculum, but we were able to get a professor to come in and, talk about this stuff and just sort of hold our own seminars. And yeah, if you're working a, full or part-time job, it's really hard to get all that extra value. And if you're working a full or part-time job, you probably don't even know all of what you're missing.
Yeah. There's definitely a gap between the students who are working full-time jobs and the ones who are not. As far as free time, as far as the clubs and the activities they get involved with, there's definitely a major
and yeah,
gap
I don't
there.
actually have the numbers right in front of me. But I do remember reading what you said before about now the majority of college students work. Although I think the numbers are somewhat skewed by community college, where you'll have a lot of people who already have jobs and are going back to finish a degree, as opposed to, the stereotypical student at a, 4-year residential university. I'm not sure if the numbers have actually been split up between those two, but I just know from talking to my own students that probably at least a quarter of them are working.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and at my university, just from conversations I've had with people around the place, about half of them are working at least part-time. So
yeah, and so I was also thinking about this, and I know it's come up in some of the talks that Andrew Yang's had about universal basic income, where if you think in terms of just $12,000 a year, you're actually missing how it would play out in the real world, which is often you have multiple adults in the same household. And so if you're looking at, a typical, married couple is getting $24,000. And once you get sort of that economy of scale, that universal basic income really starts to pay off in a different way. And if you're looking at, if you're a typical college student, you're probably going to be much more willing, or just by necessity, living with, 2 or 3 other people. So like when I was in undergrad, I lived in an off-campus apartment and it was 4 of us. So if that entire apartment is getting $48,000 a year, that more than covers our cost of living. And I just looked up apartments. I went to college at University of Alabama for undergrad, and I was just looking at apartments there now where you could get, a nice 3-bedroom apartment for under $1,000 a month. And that's, everybody's got their own room, and that apartment has an income of $3,000 a month with, $1,000 going to rent. There's enough money left over to live. You're not living a lavish lifestyle. You're living actually pretty good for a college student. And I know college students, students,
you're covering your needs.
Obviously don't want to live like college students, but the years where you're most tolerant to eating ramen and drinking liquor that comes in plastic bottles, those are your college years. When you're 30 or 40, you don't want to probably be living with 3 roommates to be able to cover your expenses. But for college students, that's sort of a time in your life where you're probably much more willing to pool your resources with a bunch of other people that don't have much money to be able to make things.
Yeah, for sure. That is always an option in your college years. It has to be. I mean, just by necessity,
exactly.
We're already doing it.
These are people who, where I'm teaching now, we have dorm rooms that are doubles that have suddenly become triples because we just have people on campus. But yeah, this is already the way that a lot of college students are already living. And so being able to sort of make use of that economy of scale is actually going to make that $1,200 a month pay off even more.
Absolutely. There is one thing that is a potential concern, and there's no way to know for sure how this would play out in the real world, but we can speculate based on market forces and human nature. And it's possible that with everybody getting $1,000 a month, that people who are currently living in big cities where rent is $4,000 a month for a one-bedroom apartment, like San Francisco, for example, those people might decide that it makes more sense for them to move out to Kansas and work a job that pays less and get the freedom dividend and end up living a better lifestyle. And so I think one possible outcome of this is we would see really expensive areas like New York City, San Francisco, major metropolises where rent is through the roof. We might see those prices start to come down as people started moving away, since they no longer needed to be there to get the money that they needed to live the comfortable life they're looking for, since they could take a lesser wage in a place where the rent is a lot lower. But the flip side of that is, with more people going into the less expensive areas, we would see prices rise in some of those areas. So I think one possible outcome of the freedom dividend would be that places like Alabama you were just talking about, rent would go up, maybe not significantly, but it could go up a few $100s a month on average. I think the freedom dividend, we're still coming out ahead, but it's definitely worth visiting those possibilities, because if there is somebody who's struggling to get by and then the rent goes up, even with the freedom dividend, that might create some consternation potentially.
Just to clarify, because I think there was actually a kind of subtle but maybe complex point that was sort of the premise of where you just got started, which is a big reason people are going to college in the first place is because they see the difference. At least what they're told, here's the amount of money you make without a college degree, here's the amount of money with one, and they see the amount without, and they're like, this is not going to sustain a comfortable life. Where they see lifetime earnings of people with a bachelor's degree compared to no degree at all. I forget what the numbers are, but it's enough where you're going to say, I basically have to have a college to live the kind of life that I want. Whereas now you might actually get a lot more people who are saying, well, with an extra $12,000 a year, I don't necessarily need a college degree to have a decent standard of living. And that's probably going to be pretty good for the students who go right into college having no idea what they want to do. It would make it a lot easier to take a gap year off and see, go work a little bit in a place with a low cost of living, take some time to figure stuff out before immediately going into college. I know a big factor in that is also, if you can get access to student loans to cover your cost of living, college becomes really appealing, just sort of as a way of getting that loan that you wouldn't be able to have access to through just, consumer lending. And this would have fewer people going to college as a way of getting access to those loans, because, well, now it's a lot more reasonable to be able to go off and live just on UBI and a relatively low paying job.
Yeah, it's definitely a good point. And I think another interesting point about how UBI would work is, even if you aren't the kind of college student who's working, and even if you aren't struggling to get by or trying to work a job in order to pay your way through, there still is some benefit. You think about like a doctoral degree, you got 8 years of college behind you. But if you're getting the freedom dividend at $12,000 a year, that's almost $100,000, right? Would that be $96,000 less student debt you've accumulated?
Yeah, that was another thing. I have some notes here. Yeah. Even if you do have to take out loans, having less debt, you're not accruing interest all that time. That can really pay off.
Right. Yeah. Because you talk about $100,000 in debt, takes a long time to pay down, and to just be able to erase that off the top for those high end degrees, that's a big deal.
So another thing that I know I've heard Andrew Yang talk about is freedom to move, and one of the things that causes, if you're in a job that's sort of below where you possibly could be, you're not using your degree or your experience to its fullest, but you're not able to find a better job where you are, but there might be a better job halfway across the country. It's pretty hard for people to do that because there's a lot of risk associated with moving, a lot of costs associated with that. But if you look at this from the point of view of a fresh college graduate, you can look at anywhere in the country and know that wherever you move to go try to find work, you still have that safety net. So, if you're graduating with a degree in computer science from, let's say, Kansas State University, and you're looking at, well, I can get sort of a mediocre office job that's not really what I want to be doing, but I can go interview there today because it's local, or I can go to Silicon Valley. I don't have anything lined up there, but I would like to be able to, start networking and stuff out there because that's the type of work you do. You now have a lot more freedom to go explore all those other opportunities.
Yeah, that actually brings up another point that I was thinking about before, and that is, right now we have a major shortage of doctors in rural areas. General practice doctors in rural areas. And part of the reason is because they can't really earn a living there. And so the freedom dividend would free up people who are interested in pursuing that sort of a career in that sort of location to go ahead and do it, because the freedom dividend would be covering their expenses and they would be free to do what they love, to help people to pursue that passion in the rural areas. And it would no longer just be a purely financial calculation.
How people pick their majors in general. There's always been the stereotype of the person that gets the degree in art history and is not able to make any money off of that. And people really are pushed toward STEM to a great degree because they think that's more likely to help them, get a good or a high-paying job, even if they're not actually interested in those. And so if you're able to say, you have a lot more freedom to get an education that's not necessarily going to pay off a lot financially. I think we're going to end up with a lot more people happy with the education decisions they're making. Because I see a lot of students who are taking classes where they'll talk to me about this either in class or in office hours. Like, they really aren't that big into computer science, but that's what their parents are telling them is, that's what you have to study because that's going to get you a job. But like with the freedom dividend, you can say, you'll probably get a lot more people interested in education. The stereotype there, of course, is teachers are woefully underpaid, and for a large part that's true. But you're not going to have as many parents saying like, no, you're not going to become a preschool teacher because you're not going to make any money doing that. You need to go major in computer science or engineering. No, you'll actually have a lot more freedom to pursue the education that you want. And when we're talking about, big 4-year universities offering liberal arts educations, you should be doing it because you're actually interested in the field and not just seeing it as a job training. Yeah. Not that there's anything wrong with job training.
100%.
Yeah. There's not anything wrong with job training programs, but it will free up liberal arts institutions to actually just be liberal arts institutions instead of making sure that they're, trying to compete in terms of, employability of their graduates, which is something that they should still be concerned with. But, I think you give students a lot more freedom to pursue their actual academic interest and not just their career.
Right. You can align the two. So if I particularly love English and writing, and I can go and I can pursue that without having to worry about the fact that everybody considers an English degree to be, about as useful as a blank piece of paper.
As someone with one, I can confirm. So I double majored in English and philosophy in undergrad. You can guess and that's how useful that is in the job market. Actually, quite a bit. But
absolutely. But and the thing is, having those conversations with my family, before choosing what major to go after, English is always like, well, what are you going to do with that?
Yeah, exactly.
Be a teacher? and so but it would free people up to really pursue their interests and figure out exactly what it is that they want to do, and then to go do it. And that would help with, people's mental health, which is a big issue nowadays. Like Andrew Yang talks about, the, suicide, depression, those rates are all up. And it's not just, adults that are suffering from these things, it's students as well. And a lot of times it's because they are doing something they hate because they feel like they have to, because that's the only way they'll ever succeed in life. And they're wondering why am I doing this? Is it even worth it? And so having that freedom dividend, having that safety net, that freedom to pursue what you actually love, what you're actually passionate about, I think would go a long way towards helping resolve some of that.
For a little bit, maybe not playing devil's advocate. I don't know. I might convince myself by this. But there could be potentially a downside if we look at, particularly challenging fields such as like biochemistry is hard, people who are doing pre-med and are going to become doctors, or even, nurses, things like that. You have these really challenging fields, but they're really useful to society, and we're actually now freeing people up to not pursue them. We always hear about there being, a skills gap or an education gap where we have all these, jobs in STEM that aren't getting filled. Like, could we end up with too few, engineers and computer scientists and nurses and doctors because we have a whole lot more poets. And, poetry is great, but maybe, like, could this end up with us misallocating our intellectual resources?
Yeah, that's a good point. And I guess it's possible, but like Andrew says, $1,000 a month is not enough to live on, and there are going to be people who are still ambitious and want to drive a different fancy car every day and live in a 16-bedroom mansion. So there's still going to be an incentive to pursue those jobs and those careers. But I think what we will do is we will take the people who are only doing it because they feel like they have to out of the equation, which will free up the teachers to work with students who are actually passionate about it. And when I get sick, I want there to be a doctor available to help me, but I would rather have a little bit longer wait for a doctor who genuinely cares and is genuinely passionate about medicine. Right. Than to get in right away and see a doctor who's just doing it for the money.
I may have accidentally put video chat on or something because it looks like you're just reading my notes. So that was actually what I was already thinking of as sort of the counterpoint. If we look at who is we're going to have fewer people getting, really challenging STEM degrees. But if we look at who specifically is dropping out, it's going to be the people who probably weren't going to be particularly successful in those fields anyway. There's not many people who, for the most part, the things that you're good at are also the things that you enjoy, because it just feels better to do something you're good at, and you get rewarded more by, getting good grades or getting, more money, getting awards and things like that. So the people who so the people who
Success
choose to not pursue
dopamine.
those things, we're probably not going to have very successful careers doing that. I don't think, it is something certainly worth thinking about. Are we going to, financial pressure can be good in a lot of ways because it potentially channels more of our workforce into things that our society has deemed more valuable. So we do have to have some concern for that. But I think it's definitely something to sort of keep on the radar, but not at the center of the.
For sure. And there's another point to make on this. And I forget who was that said it, but they said they like to ask people a question. They say, who is the smartest human being who's ever lived? And most people's answer is Einstein. And he says, Einstein did a lot of great things, but he did it because he had opportunity, because he was able to get an education and pursue things he was passionate about. And that's why he is known as the smartest human being who ever lived. In reality, given the sheer number of human beings who have been born and who have lived and died, it is most likely that the smartest human being who's ever lived probably spent their life walking 6 miles a day to fetch water from a dirty stream and died of some horrible disease before anybody knew how to cure it.
There's actually an example of this. From rural India.
The point,
and it's a story that's it's really similar to Good Will Hunting, where it was just random math prodigy, but he didn't have access to education. And I'm probably gonna just butcher the story, but he was coming up with math proofs and stuff sort of on his own. A lot of it was recreating the wheel for him because he didn't have access to that education.
Exactly. Yeah, and so by putting the resources in people's hands, we will free up, because there are millions of Americans who are living paycheck to paycheck, who are struggling to get by, who are struggling to survive. None of them are even remotely considering pursuing college in any way, shape, or form. They're just worried about, are they going to be able to pay rent and put food on the table tomorrow? And so by freeing them up, by putting the resources in their hands, there might very well be the next Einstein, who's currently living paycheck to paycheck, struggling to get by, who suddenly, with the freedom that the dividend gives him, is able to go to school and pursue what he's passionate or she's passionate about and become the next great scientist who fixes whatever, problems we're facing, or the next great politician who comes along with ideas that change the world. And right now, there are millions of Americans who are struggling, who are starving, who can't pay rent, who are getting evicted because they got fired and weren't able to build up any savings because they don't have enough money to even pay the bills. And how many of them could and would go into some of these fields that these people who have the means but don't really care about it would be dropping out of? And I think that there are definitely some, I don't know exactly how many, but I feel like they would fill some of those gaps, but we'd be filling them with people who are
So I do
passionate
have
about it instead of people
one
who are
other
just there
thing
for the
where I
money.
think there's a potential, perhaps actually a very significant downside to how UBI will play out for college. And that is, right now there's already an issue with unpaid internships, where if you go into the rules that the Labor Department has for actually what can qualify for where you get an exemption from the Fair Labor Standards Act to be able to not pay someone. It's pretty strict, and it's only a very narrow type of internship that would actually qualify, where it really has to be about the education of the intern rather than basically displacing what would otherwise be a paid employee. And I'm sure, every college student either has experienced one of these or knows someone who has been in an internship where they're really just replacing the lowest level paid employee there. And it's, fetching coffee and doing, basic office administrative work rather than them really trying to teach you in something more similar to a short-term apprenticeship. And a concern that I might have is with universal basic income, it might actually encourage more employers to have unpaid internships because, they can look at this and say, hey, look, you're already getting $12,000 a year. You're getting $1,000 a month. That's more than we were paying, interns for. So now you, college student, you don't really have room to complain about not getting paid because you have this universal basic income. And so there might be more exploitation of students who are really just desperate to get the connections and the experience and have a line on their resume. And so that would be something that I would be a bit concerned about is, will employers feel like they're no longer exploiting their labor because universal basic income is paying what they should have been?
Yeah, that's a really good point. And I can definitely see where that might be an issue, but on the same token, I feel like with the universal basic income in place,
it no longer sucks so much to have an unpaid internship. Like, you're freed up to do it, but you're sort of freed up to be exploited.
But yeah, and I definitely see that as a potential issue, and that is something that we'd have to think about and consider. And I guess the one sort of positive maybe that you could see from this is that, much like how UBI would impact low wage workers now, which would give them the freedom to leave if their job is treating them poorly. I think it would provide a little bit of that safety net. One of the things that as a college student, one of the reasons you want to get an internship is that you can get a job right out of school and start working and earning money right away. And having that safety net would allow you to shop around a little bit more to find an internship that's actually going to teach you rather than one that's just going to have you fetching coffee all day. Because you've got a little bit more time. You've got some, a parachute once you graduate. You're not just immediately free falling and I need to find something right now. So again, I don't know because I have not entered into the internship part of the world yet. That's in my future, probably a year and a half from now or so. And that's definitely a good concern. But I feel like you would have a little bit more freedom in deciding where to go, and that would potentially make whoever is offering internships
I think
more cognizant of the fact that you don't need them as much.
I think if the norm
they'd be more likely to actually offer you something of value.
Very small amounts. So I had worked, this was in grad school one summer, an internship that was, I think it was $25 a day. And so this was an internship I was getting college credit. But obviously $25 a day for a full workday is well below minimum wage, but also way above what most people are getting internship. And if we're talking about sort of that a low paid internship, with UBI, I would have so much more freedom to just quit that intern. But with so many internships already at zero pay, UBI doesn't really, I don't think it changes the equation for those positions because these are already people who, are taking the job despite it not paying anything. So you don't actually, I don't think you get more freedom to leave because you're just as free already. You're not losing any money. I think really what students are looking at is the experience that they can put on their resume. And that's really what's keeping them in those, either underpaid or non-paid jobs. As opposed to, I think it's a good point about just general, exploitative low wage jobs in the market. Generally, you're able to leave those more freely with UI. But I think when we get down to people who are working for something other than pay, it could be a different issue.
Yeah, that's true. I was just thinking that with one of the reasons the internship is so important is because I need to have that connection right away, right out the gate, in order to get hired, especially in some of these super competitive fields. If I don't have an internship at a good company, I'm not getting hired. So that's what's currently driving people into these unpaid internships is, I have to do it because if I don't work for this company that's offering me zero, I won't get a job out of school. So I feel obligated to take this internship because it's the only way I'll actually get a job. But if the need for a job is lower because of UBI, I can take a job that's not in my field straight out of school and still be okay while I attempt to build the network and work with everything. More people might be willing to say no to the unpaid internship, and the companies that are offering it would have to reconsider paying something. And that's pure speculation on my part. And again, I haven't experienced it, so I'm just kind of
I'm on the same page there. This
is
just something
here.
that came up in the middle of our conversation.
Absolutely. And like I said, it's just that's my impression of what one way that might affect it positively, but it is absolutely a concern that the exploitation of interns. And I don't know that UBI fixes it.
Really, probably what we need
and it
here
might
is
make it worse, like you said.
Independent policy of having the I guess it's the Department of Labor and universities actually becoming more involved and cracking down on internships that are actually falling outside of Department of Labor's rules for when you get an exemption from home wage. I know there has been in a couple fields a bit of work on this. I want to say it was like the fashion industry was having a lot of problems where they were just taking a whole bunch of unpaid people and really just running, fashion magazines off of free labor and calling it internships. So, could be just another separate policy here is needed to address that issue. All right. So I've run through my notes that I started with and my notes that I came up with in the middle of this. So I'm kind of out of stuff to talk about at this time. Do you have any final thoughts or any remaining issues?
No, I think we pretty much covered everything that I was thinking about and everything that I was considering.
So in that case, we'll wrap things up. We'll have another episode of this coming out at some time. I don't know. We really don't have a fixed schedule. If you have suggestions for topics that you want us to talk about, or if you want to come on and have a discussion about the policies, there will be an email address in the YouTube comments that you can email us at. And I'm not saying what it is because I haven't gone and registered one to take mail for the show yet. So I will do that sometime before this goes up on YouTube. All right. Well, there's no homework, no papers due. Office hours are never. We will be back in hopefully not too long. Goodbye, Internet. Goodbye, Carl.
Sounds good. Thank you.
Bye-bye.